This is Dennis Wing with your Friday Rhythm Games. Today we're going to play around with the amount of swing that we use. And in the second half of the video, I'm going to give you play-alongs for all this where you can try it. But first, let me demonstrate some concepts. First one is, every 4 bars, it's going to go from 100% swing, then down to 80, then go down to 60, then to 40, then to 20, then 0% swing. When students first learn to play jazz, when my students learn, they tend to over-tripletize things, like they lean more in the direction of a shuffle. And we're going to define all this in a second. But I remember my teacher, when I was first learning jazz feel, he tried to draw on paper like where I am and where I should be, and I didn't understand the drawing. So, but what he was referring to is being overly tripletized. Like, people say the swing feel is the third part of the triplet. If you have 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 1. But that may work in a shuffle where it's understood that everything's triplet based. But, you know, it can sound a little too maybe corny. It sounds hipper, let's just say it like this, in a constructive way, that if you straighten out the lines a little, but not too much. Then what I mean by straighten out the line is, if it's straight eighth notes, then it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So somewhere in between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4 is, you know, different gradations of swing. So we're going to use the DAWs setting. On my DAW, it happens to be PreSonus Studio One. I assume you can do this in any DAW, but you can program the amount of swing from 0% to 100%. So let me just clarify. 0% swing means straight feel, like 1 and 2 and 100% means exactly a triplet, meaning it's 2/3 the way through the beat. From there, I programmed, using the DAW, a blues in the key of A, where it goes 4 bars each, 100%, then 80, 60, 40, 20, 0, and then back up again, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. So you can hear it that way with no breaks in between each. And some of the interesting things I found is, for me personally, I can't really hear the difference yet between 100% and 80%. My brain just sort of like, when it's 80%, even though it's not quite triplets, I hear it as triplets. My brain just sort of groups those two together. Similarly, on the lower end, when it's only 20% swing, I hear that almost as a straight feel. So my brain just kind of puts those in the same category. However, I found that I can hear the difference between 40 and 60%, and I can tell which side of the fence it's on. Like, if you, like 40% is leaning toward the straight feel, and 60% is leaning toward the swing feel. And so I can definitely sense the difference between those two. And that's one thing I wanted to point out. Another thing I wanted to point out is some of these things are based on your perception. They sound, it's hard to explain. Like, when you're going from 100% to 80 to 60, suddenly 60 sounds a bit like quite flat. And it sounds, like it's much more towards the direction of 0 than when you're going the other way. When you're going 0, 20, and 40, and then you get to 60, suddenly 60 sounds quite a bit of swing, even though it's exactly the same as it was on the way back down. So these things are influenced by our perception of what happened before, I think. And last but not least, I like the 60% swing, and I heard Adam Neely reference this in a video, that it's a thing now to have the 5 swing. Like, 60% swing just happens to be 3/5 the way through the bar. And so if you're conceiving of subdividing each beat into 5 parts, and you play only the 4th part, then that's 60% swing. So what I experimented with was playing lines in 5, and then hearing it over 60%, it seems to fit fine, like the following. And then from there, I was like, well, if that sounds fine, and you can also put triplet lines over that, then maybe there's not such a big difference between 3 and 5s after all. So I experimented here, putting some triplet-based lines in with lines of 5, and to me, it sounds great. So I'd love your feedback on this if you're experimenting with it. And I'm going to give you some practice tracks to jam along to. Have fun and let me know how you make out.